Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Fazbear Entertainment would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, Freddy Fazbear.
Rewritten! Content warning. This video is not made for kids. It contains fictional depictions of mental illness, fictional VIOLENCE, and fictional ABUSE. The fictional characters in this story are heavily afflicted by the things that I have spelled out to you, and some of the inner monologue seems to suggest that they should be getting hurt like this, but that is absolutely not the case. Me portraying this ABUSE, or mental illness, is meant to show the audience how the illness, or ABUSE, feels inside of the mind of the afflicted person, so they can sympathize and maybe stop themselves from following a similar pattern in the future. Be careful if you are easily triggered. You're most likely about to enter the mind of someone who is heavily afflicted by illness and ABUSE. Viewer discretion is advised. DJ found it startling to recall that, a long time ago, working at the Pizzaplex actually gave him joy. Compared to the experience now, the first 16 years of his life had been heavenly. Before Jeremy came along, it wasn't a struggle to keep holding a smile all day. They hadn't known the pain of a controlled shock. Their original managers took care of them and talked through every issue that they had rather than punishing them. DJ had his voice. He could hear his family's voices. He could hear their music instead of just a simple metronome. DJ gave rides around the expansive mall, not the tight and cramped passages of the glass tunnels. His family had been happy. DJ had been happy. And then Victor passed away. DJ still wasn't sure how it happened. Someone initially said that it was a stroke. Later, another said that it was a fall down the stairs. The news eventually decided that it was actually a car accident, but the inconsistent explanations that they had given before were not addressed. The animatronics were never given a straight answer, the closed casket at his funeral burying the truth of whatever could have possibly taken him from them. No matter what really happened, DJ and the others had learned very quickly that their problems had only just begun. Jeremy began to crack down on the rules, even assigning them new managers that wouldn't be so soft on them, making them regularly use the collars that were originally only meant for emergencies. DJ had tried to defend his grieving family and point out how power-hungry Jeremy was becoming, his efforts doubling when they got the news that Bonnie had been put down for having insomnia. And what did he get for that? He was muted. I'm sorry, DJ. I don't know how to use this. I'm scared I might hurt you. Freddy had to set the electric saw down in order to use ASL. I know, but we don't have a choice. DJ signed back to him, readjusting himself to get his massive collar closer to Freddy's view. Just do it, okay? I promise I'll be fine. The glowing eyes of the other animatronics hovered in the auditorium's darkness, the shadows of the vast expanse coiling at the corners of his vision like smoke. It was 6:01 in the morning, and only 11 hours ago, they had secretly begun to distribute the paper with the QR code to the fans. Even though they had all been exhausted from reopening day's disaster, none of them had been able to close their eyes last night. It was only a matter of time before Jeremy took notice of the footage that they had leaked. And the worst part was, they could do absolutely nothing but wait for the results to come to them. The new night guard, whoever they were, would take notice if all the animatronics got up and converged in parts and services to clip their collars off. So they were forced to just sit there in their separate rooms, watching each agonizing second tick past, having no idea which one would be their last. How many people had seen it? When would Jeremy see it? Not just Jeremy. Any of the managers could find the video at any time, every single hour that passed only raising the risk that the wrong people would stumble over the leak while scrolling through social media. For the last 9 hours, DJ had lied awake in the auditorium, nothing but the curtains and the occasional staff bot to comfort him. He tossed and turned restlessly, unable to get comfortable, disastrous scenarios rampaging through his head. What if not enough people saw the videos? What if they thought that it was some sort of prank? Or even worse, what if they didn't care? The first 16 years of his life, DJ would have found it unfathomable that people would shrug off a cry for help like this. But nowadays, he wasn't so sure. The managers had shown him plenty of times how heartless humans could be. What if this amounted to nothing? What if people did see it, but they just didn't take it seriously? Then, when Jeremy inevitably realized what happened and deleted the videos, DJ and his family would only be in even more trouble than they were before. They were completely relying on the kindness of the people in the outside world, and DJ had been losing faith in humanity every day that he spent under Jeremy's rule. What if nobody cared about them anymore? What if they sided with Jeremy? What if they assumed that the animatronics were lying, that the footage was AI generated? What if this had all been for nothing? DJ wasn't a naturally anxious person, and still, he had been completely incapable of doing anything but worry like that all night long. If it was this bad for him, he could hardly imagine how bad the stress would be on the rest of his family, from how poor their mental state already was. DJ had fixated on the internal clock in the corner of his vision, waiting and waiting and waiting through every painstaking moment. Even when the wake-up alarm went off, they were still able to do nothing but appear like they were going through their normal routine of preparing their areas so the night guard wouldn't get suspicious. Once they were finished cleaning their areas, they had all gathered in the auditorium, pretending that they were about to start rehearsing once their managers arrived at 6 o'clock. The moment that the new night guards stepped foot out of the building, they got to work carrying out their plan. They rushed their way through a short song to unlock parts and services, leaving DJ to stand guard while they retrieved the lopper-like tools that they had used before on the 28th. They clipped off their new collars, every single one breaking without problem, except for DJ's. The black band around DJ's neck was made of solid steel, as thick as the wheel of a monster truck. It was secured so tightly, DJ had never been able to even shift it around during his various attempts to free himself. Still, the animatronics worked together vigorously, trying almost every single tool at their disposal, his collar doing more damage to the clippers than the clippers ever did to the collar. They all knew that if even one of them still had their collar, the entire family could still be controlled. So now, they had finally worked their way up to the electric saw that Freddy was apprehensively picking back up. "Are you sure? Absolutely sure?" Freddy signed with one hand, still keeping the serrated blade away from DJ's neck. I don't want it to cut you." "I would rather get cut by that thing than still have the collar on when Jeremy arrives," DJ told him, doing his best to smooth out his features into calmness, like Freddy was simply clipping his toenails rather than leveling a deadly weapon directly at his throat. Roxy, Chica, and Bonnie moved their mouths, saying something to Freddy. The three of them were keeping back, Roxy pacing around and Chica chewing on an unidentified object. Bonnie was nervously fiddling with his torn ears, staring into the darkness of the auditorium, directly where the entrance stood. When the managers came for them, they would be bursting through that door. I'll be fine, just do it," DJ kept on signing, nudging at Freddy to hurry. "That tiny thing isn't gonna hurt me, it looks like a freaking Barbie accessory." Freddy gave unheard nervous laughter, hopefully put a little more at ease at DJ's feigned confidence. Freddy readjusted his grip, leveling the saw closer to DJ's metal, the others closing their eyes. DJ prepared himself to stay quiet and still, even if he actually did feel pain from a slip-up. DJ obviously couldn't hear the saw actually turn on, but he did feel the jarring vibrations as the serrated blade made contact with his collar. DJ tried to focus on breathing as Freddy began to press the saw deeper, the grinding and shaking of the tool rattling through DJ's piano key teeth. When Freddy yanked the saw away, DJ peeked an eye open to see a flurry of sparks. Don't panic! His entire shell was washed with a chill, but he soon recognized that he hadn't been cut. It was the collar, sparking like it was furious that anyone would dare try and remove it. DJ propelled himself backwards, the others drawing away from the fizzing light. The tingling and the vibrations abruptly switched to agony, an electrical pulse nearly knocking DJ off the stage. He gripped onto the glossy black floor, waiting until the pain faded, the malfunctioning collar cooling down. When DJ spotted Freddy turning the saw off, he quickly began to sign, No, it's okay, I'm okay, you didn't hurt me. You were doing good, do that some more. It did hurt you, Freddy signed back to him. TJ, I don't think I can even get close again. It might blow up or set this place on fire or something. Just as DJ was formulating a reply, all 4 of the other animatronics snapped their heads to the right towards the entrance. DJ took the cue and spun around, fully expecting to see the silhouettes of their managers standing there. Instead, he only saw the forms of Monty and Sun. When the door closed behind them, Sun dropped to the floor so he could transform into Moon, the darkness taking hold of the 2 of them as Monty and Moon hurried across the empty space where the audience would normally gather. Moon was already in a complete panic, all sorts of unheard questions flying around at the others, probably trying to figure out what the heck was going on. They had decided to not let Sun and Moon know what was going on until it was time to be woken up, since it wasn't like Sun and Moon could actually do something to help the situation. Since everyone was just supposed to try and get some sleep until 6 a.m. when the night guard leaves, it hadn't seemed necessary to stress the daycare attendants out even more about what was going on. If they had told Sun or Moon what was about to happen while they were unable to change the outcome, DJ was quite sure that the 2 would drop dead on the spot from fear. But now, with the new night guard gone, Monty had been sent to gather Sun and Moon with the others to release them from their collar too. None of them had time to beat around the bush or break the news to him gently. While the others began to fill him in on what he missed, Monty angled the loppers to remove Moon's collar. Seeing his internal clock click from 6:06 to 6:07 caused a fresh wave of urgency, fully aware that the managers were probably pulling into the parking lot right now. DJ tapped near Freddy to get his attention, continuously pointing at his collar, pushing him to keep going. The fear in Freddy's eyes made it clear that he was still scared that he would decapitate DJ, but he didn't argue as he took the saw and made contact with the collar again. This time, the drilling vibrations were even shorter, sparks sputtering out of the split metal like blood. Again, DJ was electrocuted, his fingertips digging into the hard black flooring, still trying to encourage Freddy to keep going. Before Freddy could get close again, one of the sparks landed on his hand, making him drop the saw as his fur caught fire. Freddy smothered it quickly, but that didn't stop the sharp scent of burnt plastic from filling the stage. The others staggered away in alarm, Monty nearly falling off the side, their fright continuing even when the small fire was put out. Before they could figure out the best way to continue, their attention all snapped back towards the entrance door. DJ didn't even need to turn around to know that they had run out of time. All the way across the pitch-black void of the auditorium, a rectangle of light shone through the newly opened double doors. The tiny, indistinct forms of multiple humans were gathered there, their shadows stretching onwards into the darkness far in front of where they stepped. It felt like DJ had been submerged in a cascade of icy water. The sight of the glinting remote nearly paralyzed him, even from all the way across the auditorium. The burnt rubber of his neck began to crackle, already anticipating what was about to happen to him. When the figures began to advance on them, DJ kicked himself into motion, determined to overcome the terror that was slicing up and down his spine. He pushed himself up from the floor and stood above where his family was huddled, to hopefully protect them from the humans' wrath. A last-minute idea shot through him, and he quickly lowered his head, so it was in line with the segment of his body that made up his chest. He wasn't sure since he didn't have a mirror, but he was fairly certain that his boxy head was big enough to block the side of his neck as long as he kept this position. Maybe they would see that the others didn't have their collars and would assume that they had taken DJ's off as well. Maybe they would think that they had a little less power than they actually did. The closer the humans got to the stage, the closer their features came to the light. He counted roughly 6 of them, all moving together as one predatory force. Huxley's leather jacket wasn't zipped up properly, the skin of his face and the top of his balding head tinged as red as a stick of dynamite. Harper was not far behind, struggling to keep up with her high heels, her makeup smeared and lime green scarf askew around her neck. Pierce's blonde hair was sticking up in all directions like he had been struck by lightning, the disrespectful swagger now completely reduced to fury. Taylor's gray glasses were nearly sliding off of her thin nose. Monroe's orange tie knotted up into an unfixable tangle that he seemed to have given up on at this point. And, of course, leading the charge was Jeremy Miller himself. He was known to the animatronics for his temper, but the expression that he wore now made any of his previous entitled fits seem timid. He wasn't wearing his usual fancy suit, his shirt untucked and stained with sweaty patches on his chest and armpits. His dollar green eyes were burning with hellfire, his uncombed hair sticking to his forehead, a remote brandished in front of him like a dagger. Wait. DJ was genuinely surprised to see that, for once, his manager had showed up to work on time. Lagging a bit behind was Langley, donning the ketchup-stained t-shirt that probably served as his pajamas, just as wide awake as the others. When DJ spotted the phone in Langley's hand, he immediately knew who had seen the leaked footage first. DJ refused to take a single step back, locked in place as Jeremy skidded to a halt at the base of the stage. And, of course, everyone immediately started shouting at each other. Unintelligible words flung out of the manager's mouths, while Freddy pushed his family further behind him, clearly trying to reason with the angry humans. DJ could recognize the exact moment when the managers realized they weren't wearing collars, because they stopped abruptly in the middle of their attempts to scale the stage, eyes nearly popping out of their sockets. DJ glowered down at them as fiercely as he could, taking a threatening step forward, the vibrations of that movement rippling deeply through the ground. The managers let go of the stage, practically falling over each other in their desperation to get back, clearly assuming that DJ's collar was gone as well. Jeremy looked like he was going to pop a blood vessel if he hollered any louder. He was prowling back and forth, hurling his outrage at them with flying spittle and gnashing teeth. Whatever horrible things Jeremy was saying to them, the effect that it had on the others was crushing to witness. Bonnie, Chico, Roxy Moon, and even Monty began to shake and shrink away from his words, while Freddy held up his paws, clearly pleading with him to leave them alone. Something snapped inside of DJ when he saw that happening. A piece of him began to crumble apart, fiery heat rising through the fractures like magma bubbling over the crest of a volcano. DJ sucked in a breath and then let out a torrent of ugly, ear-splitting notes. The managers and Jeremy stopped briefly, slapping their hands over their heads to block the noise. Langley turned tail and ran, spurting out into the darkness of the auditorium until he almost completely disappeared, clearly not willing to risk his life for this. The remaining managers packed in tighter to Jeremy, lowering their hands once DJ let go of the obnoxious sound of his piano key teeth. There was literally nothing else DJ could do about this, just make a loud noise and hope it scares them off. And he despised it. This was all that he could do? Really? His family was breaking down into tears, getting tangled up in Jeremy's tricks, and all that he could do was scream at him, all defenses and arguments reduced to senseless noise? The old burns beneath his shock collar seared brighter and brighter in his mind's eye, until he felt certain the metal had become white-hot. Even after 5 years of wearing it, DJ still hadn't gotten used to the weight that the collar carried. The heavy pressure was constantly clamping down on his throat, squeezing tighter with every breath that he took, like it was intent on suffocating him in its iron grasp. His pain began to drill deeper, reaching the cold, empty space where his voice box used to be. He still remembered what it looked like to watch them cut his throat open and tear his voice out with no care or precision. That operation hadn't been one of maintenance or necessity. It had been personal. And this was too. That was the problem. To Jeremy, everything was personal. Everything was a direct offense or act of petty defiance. Every tiny mistake deserved punishment. Even this, when he was so clearly in the wrong, this was just a personal attack of mutiny rather than a desperate attempt to escape into a better life. DJ wanted to speak to him. He wanted to throw his own logic back in his face. But he couldn't do that anymore, not after Jeremy had decided it was better to mute DJ than to look in the mirror. So, when Freddy began the usual process of begging for his family's life, DJ tapped his shoulder with a finger. "I want to talk to him," DJ signed to Freddy, "but I'll need a translator." Freddy chewed his bottom lip, his gaze switching between Jeremy and DJ. He's saying that he's going to wipe our memories, completely reprogram us, make us tell everyone it was a bad joke," Freddy signed, sending a thrill of terror through DJ's core. DJ kept his expression from changing, nodding and signing to him. "Okay, it's okay if he thinks that I'll let him do that. Just let me talk some sense into him. I think I can get him to back off." Again, Freddy seemed reluctant, his ears pressed flat to his head. But as Jeremy started yelling again, he seemed to realize that there was no other choice. If Freddy's peaceful method wasn't working, maybe DJ's would. Freddy waved his arms around, spending half a minute just trying to get Jeremy to stop long enough for him to explain that DJ wanted to talk. Jeremy pinched the bridge of his nose, wiping a curtain of sweaty hair out of his eyes. He was saying something to DJ, something that was clearly snarky and ringed of sarcasm. Whatever he said, Freddy nodded, his ears lifting slightly in hope. "He's listening," Freddy signed to DJ. Though DJ knew that listening wasn't really the right word for it, he decided that this was the best that he was going to get. So, he stepped forward, leaving his family huddled behind him, refusing to break eye contact with Jeremy. He knew how much it disturbed him. "So I'm assuming you saw the videos?" Freddy repeated out loud what DJ had signed, his hands showing DJ what Jeremy responded with. "Yes, I saw the videos!" "Have you taken them down yet?" DJ signed. "We're working on that!" Freddy translated with a wince. "What is wrong with you?" "What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you? You and your friends are the ones that did all of that," DJ signed, a heat wave already washing over him. "You know damn well that none of that footage was faked or edited. All of that is what you put us through every single day. Does it bother you because you finally have to look at yourself in a negative light? Or that others are looking at you in a negative light?" Jeremy stared at him for a few seconds, giving him an indignant look like DJ was a cockroach that had just stood up on two legs and spoken clear English to him. He took several menacing steps forwards, his mouth slowly moving, Freddy's hands following soon after. "I did not give you authorization to access those video files. I did not give you authorization to even touch the computers." "Hey, stop!" DJ smacked the stage with a hand, sending a tremor up into his shoulders. Freddy clearly struggled to get the same force behind his translation, his mouth pulling down at the edges in uncertainty. DJ signed at Freddy. "You can tell him to stop. You're allowed to speak too." Freddy gathered himself, giving a visibly more demanding stop that made Jeremy jerk back in offense. "You're trying to distract me so I don't realize you haven't answered my question," DJ continued. "I'm gonna ask again. Does it bother you to realize that what you've been doing is wrong?" "I haven't done anything wrong," Jeremy scowled up at him, jabbing his thumb into his chest. "The things that happen behind the scenes are my business and my employees' business, not the world's." "Why do you think the world shouldn't see that? Because it makes you look like a psychopath? Because it makes you realize that you are a psychopath?" Jeremy stomped forwards, making Freddy's fur spike up as their boss's lip curled up to reveal his bone-white teeth. "You were not given permission to post those videos. That is confidential information." "Why is it confidential?" DJ signed, but Jeremy drowned Freddy out. "And where are your collars? If you clip them off again, that is destruction of property. You will be punished for this. You realize that, right?" "Stop!" Freddy didn't need to be encouraged this time. His stop was just as forceful as DJ's. "You're trying to distract me again," DJ signed. "You still haven't acknowledged that you're bothered by the videotapes because they've showcased to the public that you're a bad person." Jeremy threw his hands up into the air, unable to stamp out the shades of red crawling up his Adam's apple. "I am not going to engage in something as childish as this. Why do you think that you get to waste my time after releasing confidential information to the public?" "You're still trying to distract me. That's not going to work," DJ signed, Freddy holding the line with him. "And you're only calling it childish because you don't want to accept that I might be right about you, and childish is the only way that you can think to assert that you're still above the situation in some way." DJ was getting the impression from Freddy's firm body language that he too was getting more aggressive in the translation. This was always something that DJ wished that he could do for his family. DJ was the only one that wasn't regularly exposed to Jeremy's emotional manipulation, the only one that didn't fear him. Now that Freddy was hearing a mentally healthy person's breakdown of Jeremy's tricks, it seemed to be reinforcing his determination to keep their boss at bay. "Listen to me," Jeremy spat. "You will all return to parts and services, put on spare collars." No, we won't. Both Freddy and DJ made a move forwards, working as one. You're trying to regain control of the situation. You feel helpless right now because we don't have the collars. You want to be able to torture us so you can feel powerful again. Shut up! Jeremy's frustration was rising like a geyser about to blow. You have no right to talk back to me like that. You are my property. I can do whatever the hell I want with you. I could throw you into a furnace and melt you down into scrap and nobody would stop me. I have every right to speak to you this way because you have spoken far worse to us with no consequences. DJ kept his response calm. You're still trying to scare me into letting you regain control of the situation because in reality you know that you can't actually go through with any of those ridiculous threats right now. Just because you're our boss doesn't mean that you're allowed to abuse us and keep us in these living conditions. Again, does it bother you that people are going to see how psychotic you are? People aren't going to think that I'm psychotic, they're just gonna laugh. A grin cut its way out of Jeremy's face, contrasted by the beads of sweat dripping down his forehead. Do you actually think that they've been taking any of that seriously? You are a new breed of idiot if you think that anybody is going to believe your stupid story. What are they going to get mad about? Me punishing bad behavior? All I've done is give you a few zaps. It's not that big of a deal. DJ gave a measured exhale, signing, Stop downplaying what you've done to us. If you felt what an electric shock felt like, you would be saying something very different. No, I don't think I would. Jeremy's shoulder bumped up in what must be a chuckle. You're just being dramatic. We don't use a voltage high enough to leave long-term damage. You're only saying that because you don't want to feel guilty about it, DJ signed simply. You don't want to believe that you're a bad person. You're so afraid of admitting to yourself that you're in the wrong, you would rather throw all logic and empathy out the window and act like I'm not even sentient enough to hold a real conversation with you. You know, the thing that I'm doing right now. There was a momentary falter, so small that DJ wouldn't have spotted it if he wasn't seeking it out. I don't have anything to feel guilty of. I've never done anything illegal. Jeremy began to pace on the edge of the stage. It is completely within my right to discipline my property when you act up. It's your own fault if the managers feel it necessary to shock you. All you guys do every single day is break and glitch out and give us an attitude and complain about the smallest things, and how do you think we're supposed to react to that? Just keep letting you mess everything up? No, we discipline you, no matter how ineffective it seems to be sometimes. If you just behaved, you wouldn't have to be shocked. DJ didn't miss a beat, letting most of that flow past him. Stop victim blaming us. It's not our fault if we can't keep up with your ridiculous demands. What ridiculous demands? Demands for you to do your job right? No, your demands for us to be perfect every single second of every single day. DJ let the years of resentment shine through now. Your demands to show no emotion besides fake enthusiasm, to stop crying from the stress you put us under, to keep performing until we run ourselves into the ground. You're exaggerating and you know it. Jeremy rolled his eyes. People use shock collars on dogs who bark too loudly, and they've never been charged with a crime. The shocks don't hurt nearly as much as you're making it out to be. Lying to the public is not going to get you on their side. I haven't ever lied to the public. I've just shown them what you're like when you think they're not watching, DJ signed. If what I showed them is really not illegal, you should have nothing to worry about. Jeremy blinked rapidly at the floor, one of his fingers elevated. He dropped that hand to his side, pumping his chest back out. Look, nobody is going to care about those videos. We've already deleted them. If nobody will care about the videos, why are you so worked up about it? DJ pressed on. Is it because you know that it's wrong to do what you did? That you are aware that normal people will have an issue with this? Jeremy stopped his pacing abruptly, as if he thought that the force of his glare would be enough to make DJ back off. DJ stared right back at him, Freddy doing the same. You need to stop giving me this attitude right now. Do you have any idea how serious this is? Jeremy seethed. I know perfectly well how serious it is. Well, it doesn't seem like you do. Jeremy's eyebrows arched high, the exaggerated grin returning. You have no idea what's coming, buddy. The moment the guards get here, they're going to make you regret ever being invented. That won't make the public unsee what they saw on the QR code, DJ pointed out calmly. You know how they will react. You know that what you've done is wrong. You just don't want people to see that part of you. How do you think your wife will react? Or how about your daughter? DJ had never properly met Jeremy's daughter and was genuinely curious if Jeremy actually cared about how she thought of him or only cared that she would continue his bloodline. What is your daughter going to say when she sees that you've been torturing the daycare attendant that she visits every day? DJ asked, digging for any hint of human emotion left in him. In fact, not just her, but your mother. If your mother were still alive, would she even recognize you? How about your father? He loved us as if we were his own. If your father were here, what would he say to you after watching those recordings? Do you think that he would pat you on the back and say, "Great job, son, you've really made me proud. I'm so glad this family's legacy is in your hands"? No, he wouldn't. In fact, he would probably disown you on the spot. Do you even care about that? Is there one cell in your body that's capable of shame or self-awareness? Or do you just strut around all day thinking that you're the hero because you make more money than your dad did? The way that Jeremy's smile dropped off of his face revealed so much more than any words could spell out. DJ did not give him space to make a retort. Victor loved you more than you love your own daughter, and yet you disrespect his grave and torture his greatest creations just because you're jealous that we got more attention than you did. One of Jeremy's eyes twitched, and he busied himself with raking sweaty hair out of his face. The tension in his pursed lips said a lot more than Jeremy was clearly aware of. DJ was unable to stop at this point. He had been in silence for so long. He had so many things to say to this boy, and he just couldn't hold it back anymore. This may be the one and only time he would get a chance to sit Jeremy down and drop a steaming chunk of reality in front of him. And yeah, that sucks. It probably sucked that your dad had to spend most of his time developing his small business instead of playing catch with you. But that does not justify your actions in the present, because in case if you haven't noticed yet, none of us asked to be made. He brought us to life on his own volition. You can't keep blaming us for something that we didn't intend to do. You think that you're mad at us, but honestly, I think that you're really just mad at your father. Once our creation was already over and done with, Victor had no choice but to invest in us. We were the only way to get food on the table. It wasn't personal. In fact, he was doing all of it for you, so you could grow up to be whatever you wanted, and yet you still took it in the worst way possible. We don't deserve to be enslaved like this just because your feelings were hurt a decade and a half ago. But even though you know that, you would still rather see yourself as the victim and endlessly torture us instead of going to therapy for once. DJ could distinctly point out the moment that Jeremy stopped listening, then the moment he refused the idea of self-reflection, before finally letting his narcissism shield him from criticism yet again. Okay, that's it, Jeremy said, exasperated. I'm not talking to you anymore. You're clearly not going to listen. Freddie stopped translating at that point, the communication line between them broken. Jeremy was giving orders to the managers, yelling something out into the darkness to try and get Langley to come back and help, which of course he didn't. Huxley climbed up onto the stage first, marching up to them like he was thinking it may be physically possible to wrestle Monty into a collar. Pierce, Taylor, Monroe, and even Harper followed suit, closing in on them, clearly trying to intimidate them into submission. However, Freddie did something completely unexpected. Something seemed to have been triggered inside of him, and his fright dropped entirely, replaced by a ferocious snarl. His lips peeled back to show long white fangs, his fingers splaying out with razor-sharp claws, an animalistic snarl jabbing out from his usually softened features. It was his security mode, DJ realized, but there were no human children around to protect. How was he doing that? The managers had recognized the same thing and stopped right in their tracks, eyes flaring wide in fear. They glanced back to Jeremy for further instructions, but he appeared to still be yelling at them, ordering them to keep going. The managers exchanged a couple of words with each other, and Pierce elbowed a few of the others, trying to get them to go first. Seemingly in exasperation, Monroe shook himself off and began to stride forwards, his chest stuck out and his chin held high, opening his mouth to demand Freddy to stand down. Monroe learned very quickly that Freddy was not bluffing. The huge metal bear launched forwards with a speed that DJ had never seen from him, snapping his jaws closed over Monroe's shoulder. He casted Monroe aside with ease, the man sprawling out on the stage and rolling several meters away, nearly falling completely off the edge. At that, the other managers scattered, completely abandoning ship and leaving Monroe trembling on the ground, his orange tie askew, still trying to regain his bearings. Freddy hadn't bitten him hard enough to draw blood. It was more of a grab than a bite. But when the lumbering animatronic went after him for another go, Monroe fumbled back to his feet and bolted away just like all the others. Freddy's mouth hung open in an unheard roar, only chasing Monroe for a few steps, giving one last swipe before skidding to a stop and backing up to return to his family, angling the defensive stance back down towards Jeremy. Jeremy had been the only one to not flee, though it may have been simply from freezing in place rather than an act of bravery. Freddy gave what DJ assumed was some verbal warnings, and for a few seconds DJ really thought that Jeremy was about to cower as well. DJ gave out some more harsh notes to try and help Freddy's effort, puffing himself up in hopes to scare him off, feeling his own security mode beginning to show. But then, Jeremy's eyes darted over DJ's exposed throat, a nasty grin crawling over his features. DJ jerked his head back down, but it was too late. When he had straightened up, he had let his still-attached collar come into view. DJ only had time to lurch to the left before agony crashed down onto him like a lightning strike. He luckily didn't fall on top of his family, but his collapsed body spasmed uncontrollably, a rising tide of white pixels overcoming him. When things cleared up again, DJ was staring up at a portion of the velvet curtains, darkness circling him like he was some wounded animal, urging him to stay down. But when he caught sight of Jeremy approaching his family, DJ launched himself back into action. He made a wild swipe in Jeremy's direction, a gloved finger smacking the remote out of his hand, making it fall and disappear among the auditorium floor within seconds. DJ rolled over so he was facing his family, scooping them up into his arms and leaping off the stage. He hit the floor sooner than he expected, the impact felt through his entire endoskeleton as he struggled to keep a hold of his family. They were reflexively trying to grab onto something, not having expected to be picked up. Monty clung to DJ's left wrist while Chica tried to keep Roxy from falling between his ring finger and middle finger. On his other hand, Freddy was hugging both himself and Bonnie onto DJ's gloved thumb, Moon hanging upside down on DJ's pinky finger with his leg caught around his knuckle. DJ tried to distribute them better among his second set of hands, only able to use 3 legs at a time if he still wanted to be able to walk. Just as he was about to flee, another shock rocketed through his throat. It was longer this time, the crash of DJ's side on the floor nearly knocking him unconscious. Every atom in his body shrieked at him, the pain echoed in his piano key teeth as he tried to keep from hurting the little ones in his arms. When the electricity released him, DJ could hardly tell which way was up, the dizziness curving to the right as he tried to pull himself back to his feet. Luckily, the material that his gloves were made out of were not conductive, meaning that the others weren't being shocked by the contact, probably the only good thing about this entire situation. DJ didn't care to look back, instead setting his sights forwards and charging towards the exit. Had to get them to safety, had to get them away from Jeremy. Run, run, faster, faster! Just as he began to pick up speed, DJ was sent toppling to the floor with another explosion of pain. He grinded to a halt at the double doors, the golden star pattern swirling around him like a fever dream as agony coursed through his wires. And it wasn't stopping, it wasn't stopping. That thought kept zapping frantically around his mind as the pain went on and on, becoming terrified that it would never end, it would never end. It hurt, it hurt, it hurt so bad. Please stop, please stop, please stop. He couldn't do this, he couldn't do this. DJ's body went limp when the pain lifted, electricity still spazzing in his fingers, his back, his head. He gulped down breaths, trying to regain his bearings, his vision clearing. The blurry forms of his family were moving their mouths, but he couldn't tell if they were talking to him or Jeremy, who was undoubtedly not far behind. His neck rolled back, finding the exit door again, but they wouldn't be able to escape that way. The guards would get them with their prods. Instead, DJ's gaze drifted up to the entrance of his tunnel, several meters above the doors, the glassy rim twinkling at him in the dim lighting. When DJ sent the signal to move his limbs, they only twitched at first, like they were trying to convince him that this was a terrible idea. He gritted his piano key teeth and forced himself to sit up again, gathering his family in his arms, his body overcome with weak quakes as he stretched up, stashing them in the tunnel so they were out of reach. Good luck using the prods on them now, he thought. His spine flared with soreness at the movement, and he dropped back down to the ground, trying to catch his breath. The next controlled shock slammed him to the floor and pinned him there like a bug under a fly swatter. It was impossible to hold in his scream this time, the off-key notes thundering through his head. Every single nerve in his body was howling at him that he was being burned alive, that this is the closest thing he could get to experiencing hell itself. And that suffering just kept going on and on and on, longer and longer, far past anything he could possibly tolerate. When the collar finally stopped, he was left as a crippled mess. The icy cold floor pressed into his cheek, giving him a lopsided view of Jeremy creeping up towards him, his dollar green eyes gleaming with mocking triumph as he pressed the button again. The horrible pain came back at full force. DJ covered his face with his hands, his fingertips scraping flecks of his white paint off, trying to keep himself from making noise. That was what Jeremy wanted. He couldn't give him what he wanted, but it was hurting so bad, the pain marching through his body in pulses, the collar strangling him with invisible lashes of torment. He tried to think of his family, to think of why he had to hold on, but every time he tried to form a coherent thought, it was impaled by the shock and scattered into a million pieces. DJ flailed desperately, his fingers digging into the doorframe as he tried to pull himself up into the tunnel. Jeremy only turned up the voltage, forcing all 6 legs to buckle as he crashed back down to the ground, overwhelmed with a new wave of suffering. It hurt more than he could describe. The pain burned and twisted and thrashed all over his body. It hurt so bad. It hurt so bad he couldn't take it anymore. Please, just make it stop. For the first few seconds, he hadn't realized that it had ended. The tanks in his chest finally allowed to expand and take in another gasp of air. His entire body stung like it had been charred, the collar practically chaining him to the floor, keeping him down as his thoughts began to bleed into each other, struggling to properly remember where he was, who he was, and what was going on around him. And then he saw Jeremy's face. He saw Jeremy laughing. The sound of it wasn't there, but the movement sure was. His shoulders rose and fell, his chest pumped in and out, a grin opened up beneath 2 dollar green eyes. He was laughing at him. All of them were. Like him writhing on the floor was the funniest thing they had ever seen. The controlled shock made its hideous return, and it became harder to feel the ground beneath him, harder to feel the wall at his back, harder to feel or move or think anything at all, his mind just imploding again and again as waves of electricity corkscrewed through him. It wasn't going to stop this time. This was his life now. This was what it would be like until the day he dies. Jeremy would just keep laughing and laughing until DJ took it all back, but it wouldn't stop then, it wouldn't stop. He was never going to let them go, he was never going to let them escape. He would be punished for speaking out forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Jeremy was laughing at him. He could see his face blurring almost everything else out, just laughing and laughing and laughing at him. His mind kept retreating further and further inside of his head, the unbearable pain forcing into the very edge of his sanity. Numbness began to flow over DJ, his consciousness flickering in and out as he was driven closer and closer to his breaking point. For 5 years, DJ had put up with treatment like this. For 5 long, unforgiving, hellish years, DJ had been forced to sit in silence as his family tore itself apart, forced to watch as Jeremy chipped away at them bit by bit. And why? For being made? For existing? In these foggy moments, DJ felt like he could finally see the real reason behind it all. Because Jeremy was still laughing at him. Laughing because it makes him feel strong, laughing because he's incapable of empathy, laughing because of his insatiable need for power over others. If he felt what I felt. That thought began to repeat itself, growing louder through the haze of agony. If he felt what I felt. If he felt what we felt. Something inside of DJ snapped. The pain no longer felt like pain. Instead, it was unquenchable hatred. But the word hatred itself didn't seem big enough to describe what DJ was feeling right now. It was just the only thing that he could think of in the moment. Hate. Hate. Hate! The acidic emotion started in his chest, the throbbing, heaving pressure expanding into his limbs, marching up his spine, completely consuming him in a raging inferno, blocking out everything else. He wanted Jeremy to hurt. He wanted Jeremy to scream. He wanted Jeremy to feel what he felt. DJ began to fight for control over himself. The seizing jerks of his body had a firm hold over him, trying to keep him curled up in a petrified huddle. But DJ shoved himself past that, past the shaking in his pistons and gears, yanking his right hand up and biting down on the glove. He tore the fabric off, revealing the black endoskeleton of his hands, each metal finger clawing at the air as he tried to take control of its wild movements. Next, he had to get the rest of him to obey his brain's commands. As he gathered his legs beneath himself and began to push at the ground, his balance swung wildly to the left, making him stagger. His eyes fixated on Jeremy, his mouth wide open in laughter, laughing at how badly the small effort was hurting him. His amusement only added fuel to the fire inside of him, and he braced his quivering hands against the floor, the collar on his neck unable to stop him as he gathered up every drop of strength that he still had and lunged at Jeremy. Everything was swept into a blur so fast he hardly realized what was happening until the pain from the collar shut off. Jeremy was pinned beneath DJ's gloveless hand, his laughter replaced by unheard cries of terror. Leftover sparks sputtered out of DJ's damaged collar, hot smoke rising from the glossy white surface of his shell as he towered above Jeremy's helpless figure. Jeremy was so tiny beneath DJ's gloveless hand, so delicate and vulnerable, akin to the size of a pygmy mouse. It would be easy to crush him. So easy. He would just have to close his fingers and this little human would pop like a grape. No more Jeremy. But that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted to teach him a lesson. DJ's eyes dragged themselves to Jeremy's remote. He had dropped it just out of his reach, the wretched button facing upwards, presenting an idea too good to pass up. DJ lifted his other still-gloved hand and pressed the remote's button. As always, the shock of the collar began to choke DJ. But this time, with his gloveless hands metal touching Jeremy, the electricity was conducted into both of them. The reaction was immediate. Jeremy's body squirmed beneath his palm, his eyes rolling back, mouth agape in what must be a scream. DJ lifted his finger from the button, the shock ceasing. Jeremy wasn't even trying to wriggle out of his grasp, his mouth agape and eyes popping, completely stunned by how much a controlled shock actually hurt. Not so funny anymore, is it? DJ jammed his finger on the button a second time. The shock crashed back over them both, but DJ hardly felt it anymore. Instead, the splitting agony in his wires was reflecting the wrath that was coursing through him, giving him strength that blinded him completely. DJ lifted his finger again. He could see it in Jeremy's eyes, he could see the pleads for him to stop, but that only encouraged DJ to keep going. You never stopped when it came to us. Why should I stop when it comes to you? He stomped on the remote, the torture continuing. DJ didn't care that he was in just as much pain as Jeremy was. He didn't care that he was hurting himself for the sake of revenge. He didn't care how morally questionable this was. All he wanted was for Jeremy to feel it too, to understand what he did to them every day, to regret ever laying a hand on his family. He jammed the button again and again, so many times he lost count. He couldn't stop, not even for a second, the desperation to hurt Jeremy overriding the pain he was causing himself. He did not care. He did not care if his body burned like this for the rest of his life. He just wanted Jeremy to feel it too. Nothing else mattered. The entire universe was zeroing in on these moments, his rage leading him on through the electrocution, on and on and on and on, leaning his weight into the remote, happily letting the shock surge through him on the way to Jeremy's flesh. And then it stopped. His vision darkened for a moment, his legs wobbling unsteadily. He lifted his finger and saw shards of broken plastic flake off of the skeleton of his palm. DJ had crushed the remote completely. DJ strained to stay upright, the auditorium teetering around him, the aftermath stinging every fiber of his being. He rounded his shuddering glare back on Jeremy. Jeremy was curled up beneath his metal fingers, trembling like a dry leaf, the foam in his mouth splattering with every retching cough his lungs took on. His eyes were stretched wide open, his pinprick pupils rotating to meet DJ's gaze, the laughter nowhere to be seen. DJ could kill him right now. Jeremy was completely at his mercy, his fragile human body only inches away from being squashed by several dozen tons of solid metal. If he just shifted his weight forward, Jeremy would become a red smear on the glassy black floor. But the more sensible part of him tried to push its way to the front to remind him of what may happen to his family if he did that. If word got out that the animatronics had murdered someone, their cry for help would be skipped over without a second thought. DJ had to let Jeremy go. But that didn't mean he couldn't scare the living daylights out of him first. DJ slowly, oh so slowly, began to lean back, the tanks in his chest drinking in a long, full breath of air, his massive mechanical body rearing above Jeremy as the tiny human braced for impact, up and up and up until... DJ slammed his gigantic hands down on either side of Jeremy and let out a deafening roar that even he didn't know he was capable of. Every piano key in his teeth was cranked to the max, the sound like two planets colliding, all of that overwhelming noise focused only a few feet away from Jeremy's face. It was so loud his speakers began to peak into a high-pitched shriek, his entire body racked with the incredible force, the roar pouring out of him more and more until his breath finally ran out. When the raving chords died off, a dull ringing filled DJ's head. DJ stood above him, heaving breaths in and out, watching a newly traumatized Jeremy literally piss his pants from fright. If DJ could have used normal words, he would have. But screaming a storm of off-key chords was the only thing that he could do to express his resentment and disgust of his corrupted boss. If Jeremy wanted a peaceful solution, he should have left that option open. Jeremy seemed to gradually realize that he hadn't died from all of that. He was quivering miserably as he tried to pick himself back up, every ounce of his entitled command squashed out of him. Jeremy's shaking fingers rose up to the sides of his head, and DJ realized that thin trails of blood were leaking out of his ears. When DJ leaned closer to him to get a better look at his work, Jeremy scrambled to his feet, tripping over himself as he finally regained control of his flopping legs and fled. A part of DJ wanted to go after him, to chase him down and do all of that again and again until Jeremy's eardrums became irreversibly destroyed. It would be so fitting to take away what Jeremy had once taken from him. But he held himself back, rooting himself firmly into place as he watched Jeremy run for his life. Once the boy was out of sight, DJ turned to join the others up in the glass tunnel, preparing to do all of that again if anyone else tried to take his family from him. He hoped that at least Jeremy would take note of one very important detail from this experience. DJ could have done much worse, but he chose not to. I know that I'm the one that made Jeremy this way, but I still hate him, and I still love seeing this happen. So, sorry if that scared you. So, I gotta go back to... Okay, if you enjoyed the video and you liked Jeremy getting beaten up by DJ, please like the video and comment about your favorite part. It doesn't take very much time or effort from your part, but it really, really helps me in the long run, and it helps get this sort of thing out to other people. So I'm still all hyped up for finally getting this episode out. It is my favorite. He deserved it. Okay, anyway, so sorry about all this energy I'm carrying. I think that's all I had to say. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for liking and commenting and all of that. It really, really helps me out, and I'm so excited because we're finally getting the rewrite like finished with. We're almost done. I mean, we're not really, but you know, we're almost getting to the happy part of the rewrite where we're finally gonna like start healing from all this stuff that's been happening. You know, the trauma and danger and sadness is almost over. So, anyway, I think that's all I had to say. I think I said that before, but bye! Love you guys. Thank you for watching the video and getting this far. Bye!